All right, so today we're gonna take a deep dive into something pretty dark.
Hmm.
It's one of those things in Pokemon that you kind of remember it as a kid and you're like, oh, that's sad, but then as an adult you're like, oh, that's really messed up. So we're gonna talk about Cubone and Marowak, and specifically I want to talk about the story of Cubone wearing its dead mother's skull and sort of the implications of that. Because on the surface it's like, oh, that's very sad. The Pokemon is very sad, but if you think about it a little deeper, it's like, well, how did the mother die? And the games don't really give us a lot of information about that, so we're kind of left to assume like, oh, maybe she died of natural causes or something. But there's this fan theory out there, and it's gaining some traction. And the fan theory is that Marowak was murdered, and not only was she was murdered by this like primal Kangaskhan. And it's interesting because it kind of makes you think like, well, if there's this primal Kangaskhan out there, like how strong is this thing? Like what else is out there in the Pokemon world that we don't know about? And that's where it gets even darker, because this theory suggests that because of this like brutal death, Marowak's spirit couldn't find peace. So she became like this vengeful ghost and haunts the Pokémon Tower. And there's all these stories from players who say that when they're in the Pokémon Tower, they can hear like these creepy whispers, like desperate pleas for help, and even growls that sound like, calls for revenge. So just imagine you're a kid, you're playing the game, you're going through the spooky tower, and you hear that, like that would be terrifying. And then imagine you're Cubone. Not only are you carrying around the skull of your mother who was brutally murdered, but like her vengeful spirit might be with you too. And that's got to mess a Pokemon up. And then, later in the games, Cubone evolves into Marowak, who also wears a skull. And some people think that Marowak is actually wearing the same skull that Cubone is wearing. So it's like this endless cycle of trauma and vengeance. And it's dark, but it makes you think about the deeper meaning of these Pokemon stories. So I'm curious, does this change how you see Cubone at all? Does it make you see the whole, wearing your mom's skull thing a lot more messed up? And what does it say about the Pokemon world? Is this level of like violence and this primal power, is it a common occurrence? Or is this Cubone's story just like a really dark exception to like the otherwise happy world we think we know? It's just something to think about.